but it's a great morning. And I had frost on my windshield yesterday. It's a little warmer today. And for my friends in Minnesota and Wisconsin who listen early in the morning like this, it took me 3 minutes to defrost my windshield. 3 whole minutes. I just thought you might want to know that. So we've been talking about faith and looking at Hebrews, the 11th chapter, to help us in our journeys through life. And so far we've come across two really great gems for us as we grow in faith. And the first is faith is not just believing, but it also has a desire to please. And so faith wants to please God. It not only believes that God's real, but it wants to please God. And that's an important part of faith, in that it looks forward to a future, and even sometimes behaves in ways that don't make sense to other people, but it's things that we can't see. And that's an important part of faith, because once we realize it and we see it and we hold it in our hands, it's no longer faith. And so it's the substance of faith is invisible, which I think is really a cool concept. And we've looked at Abraham and a little bit at Sarah. And now we're going to start with verse 13, and another great little thing to add to our understanding of faith. And so this is Hebrews chapter 11, verse 13 and following. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been looking for the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. And so the next thought is, God gives us these great promises, and sometimes we walk through our journeys of life, and we do receive the promises of joy and peace that he's given to us, the grace and the forgiveness that he offers to us, and sometimes we don't. And this teaching this morning tells us that Abraham was promised a land, for example, but he never got there, really. He never got to live there. He never got to see his inheritance realized. It was always in the distance, far away. But he kept walking. He kept believing. He kept wanting to please God. He kept going where he was told. He stayed obedient. And so the promise that God gave to Abraham was a heavenly promise, which is that something that motivates us? Are we motivated by heavenly promises? In this world you will have trouble, right? But be of good cheer, for Jesus has overcome the world. Well, that's a promise of a heavenly reality. That the promise is not believe, have faith, and you won't have any trouble. That's not the promise. The promise is a heavenly promise, as are most of the promises that God gives to us. And people of faith, they understand that. We understand that we are walking not toward an earthly destination, but toward a heavenly one. And so we should be practicing with our souls what it means to be a believer and what it means to walk toward heaven. And we should be, as the writer tells us, we should be gathering some people with us to walk on our journey. We should not be walking alone, but walking with those who are fellow heirs of the promise. And so that's like a big thing that I'm on right now, is we need to be walking together with other people. We've taught ourselves to be this kind of isolationist society, and our faith can't be like that. That's not what our faith involves other people. Sure, it's pleasing God, but it's also bringing other people into a place where they can please God as well. And sometimes we forget that. And so I want to just encourage you in your journey of faith to remember to please God. So there's just a couple things that I wanted to lift up about this. It just they jump out at me as I read about Abraham. It says all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. And I wonder if they expected to receive the things promised. And I thought about that for a little while last night as I was thinking about what I was going to say this morning. And I think the answer has to be yes. Of course they expected it. Of course they expected it in this life. Of course Abraham expected to go to the promised land and receive it as an inheritance so that his children had a place to live with some security in their futures, and his grandchildren and generations to follow. That's what he expected. He expected that to be a place flowing with milk and honey, rivers and dew, and he expected all of those things, but he never got it. And what's fascinating to me, I thought about what happened. Eventually Moses brings the people out of Israel, and he brings them to the promised land, and they live there, but they don't live out the fullness of the promise, because it's supposed to be a land of rest, a land of peace, a land where God is supreme and he is their king and he is the monarch, and that is their form of government. And it's really almost never been like that. It's not like that today. And so I thought about that for a while, that the promises are meant to lead us and urge us forward. They're meant to be believed, they're meant to be anticipated as to be received, but they're also meant to be trusted that what you do not receive of the promise in this life, you will receive in the next. That's comforting and yet a little disturbing. It's only disturbing because, I would like to have the fullness of all of my joy now, but I only get it in pieces. I would like to have the fullness of peace now, but again, it's just here and then gone. It's like a wind, a breath of wind. And I think it's supposed to be that way. I think it's not supposed to be that I am totally at rest now, or that I am totally at peace. But it's meant, as Paul talks about it, when I compare this life with the next, they're incomparable. Because in this life, creation groans, he says in Romans, and nothing can be compared to the life that follows this life. And so I only catch a glimpse of immortality as I walk through my days. And if I stay with it being disturbing, it could probably bother me for a long time. But it's not meant to be like that. It's not meant to be disturbing. It's meant to be a glimpse of immortality, a glimpse of the joy that is before me, what is ahead of me. That's what it's meant to be. It's meant to be, wow, look where I'm going. Look what's ahead of me. Look at the fulfillment of the promise. And that's how people of faith walk. That's how we walk through our days. That's how we walk through our troubles. Because we know that our troubles are temporary, that they come and go. But our joy, that little piece that we get today, is just a little bit of a great big joy that's waiting for me in the heavens. And I think faith does that. It leads us out of the disappointment and the focus on sorrows and we didn't make it and that kind of stuff into we're almost there. We're getting close. We're getting close. We're getting close, right up to the very end. and I walk through the doorway of this life into the next, saying to myself, I am no longer getting there. Now I made it. I'm there. I'm at home with my Heavenly Father. And that brought me great solace to know that I am walking into my forever, and I catch glimpses of my immortality, like through a window, or as James says, in a mirror, dimly. I get to see a little bit of what is ahead of me. And I hope that you know the promises of God well enough to know that you can anticipate that with great enthusiasm, because God has a place for his children, an inheritance for us that can never perish, spoil, or fade. And I am grateful for that. And so as you go through whatever you're going to go through today or tomorrow or the days after, whether they be earthly sorrows or joys, understand this: God has a great promise for you, and that is eternal joy, and an inheritance kept for you in the heavens. So you walk toward that with great faith. Trust God and please him with your obedience. It's been good to chat with you this morning, and I hope you have a lovely week. Thank you.